the title is a little clickbaity. It's just to get your attention. It's going to be about UX design. Feel free to put your hand up, and we can make it more like a fireside chat. It doesn't have to be just a direct presentation, kind of like the previous ones were. And there might be a few quizzes, so get ready for them. So this title was kind of just inspired by an app I saw in the wild. It was a previous company I was working for, and we were providing the SDK, and I was in the middle of debugging the SDK for this app. And you know, I was signing up many times, like 15 times, to check the flow and everything. And the Bluetooth wasn't working, and it was a bit of a mess. But then I realized this sign-up flow is so difficult. My grandma could never sign into this app. And I was like, why? What are we working on here? Is anyone actually going to use this or be able to log in? So that's where that comes from. So an alternative title would be UX design for developers. Who here knows what UX means? Should be everyone. I think we're mostly developers or tech people. So yeah, it's what's this? Is it the connection?
Just not sharing it again.
Yeah, is it?
Yep.
It says it's recording.
Sorry guys, just give us 1 sec. Maybe answer a few questions while
I can probably keep going, like there wasn't much on the screen. So yeah, I should introduce myself. I'm Carson. I've been a mobile developer, mostly Android, probably 90% Android, and 90% native Kotlin and Android. Done a bit of Flutter, a bit of iOS, very little web, so no expert in that. Yeah, so worked at some startups and some big companies, and different experiences with the design process in those companies. So I want to share what I think we could all improve on. So another alternative title would be, why are so many apps frustrating and hard to use? There's a good Reddit site, which I got a few of these images, or a subreddit from about bad UX design. So yeah, the calendar is often an example of bad UX. It's hard to get right. And how many times have you been trying to enter your date of birth and they won't let you do it by the keyboard? You have to tap through the years and that kind of thing. I think even Google's calendar widget on apps was a bit wild for a time. Yes, let me check my notes. So how many people here think all of the apps on their phone are really smooth and great to use? How many think that maybe 10% are really frustrating? Yeah, that's quite a lot. What about maybe 40%? Yeah, okay. So the question is why do we keep getting it wrong? And I think the easy answer is it's just really hard. People are generally probably overconfident at how when they start designing a new app, and they think, oh, it's just buttons and a list, it'll be fine. But it takes years of experience to get good at it. So if I was a CEO, I would definitely hire a designer for my front-end product. But also, it's not just about the designer, obviously. This is a talk trying to encourage devs to get involved with the design process as well. Let me check my notes. Yeah, so there's a common pitfall with UX design, where everyone thinks it's easy and it's actually really fun, so everyone wants to get involved. And then what I've seen happen quite a bit is the managers usually make the decision rather than deferring it to designers, just because they're the manager or the CEO or the CTO, and everyone's like, what should we do? And they just ask them. So yeah, I think everyone should upskill in UX design. So another alternative title is about exactly that. Don't just be a code monkey. Don't just take your request from your CTO and start coding. Or actually don't even take your design from the designer and start coding if it looks weird or strange or different to how all the other apps on your phone work. I think there's a case for designers trusting developers more, especially maybe if you're experienced 5-10 years developer and the designer hasn't really designed for that platform before, or they're more of a graphic designer moving into UX design. I don't know what's going on with this thing. Is it going to sleep or something? It's yeah, could. Okay, let me just try that.
Sorry.
Is it still recording? Or?
It is still recording, but you have to reshare.
Yeah.
And you've got to get your presentation back.
I can do it. I think I know where it is. Yeah.
It's hidden away. Yeah, there it is. Yeah. So you just got to push that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Click on it and just pull it. That's your presenter view. So you don't want that one.
Yeah. No, I don't want that one there. Where is it gone?
Do you want me to grab it for you? There.
Yeah, I don't see it. That's not it.
That's not it?
No. Maybe it crashed.
No, it's there.
There it is. It was, yeah, full screen. Okay, we're back. In my presenter view. Yeah, so also trust the experts. If there's an experienced designer on your team, don't think you know better if you're like just got a few months experience in this design stuff. I'll quickly run through this. It's kind of controversial stuff. I'll just getting a little behind. So I think UX design is more important than these things like UI design. Making sure the colors and the fonts match is nice, but I think maybe you should spend 10-20% of the time on that, and a lot of your design effort more on how it works for the UX design. Agile, don't get me wrong, I love the Agile process, and I think it was a great revolution for how companies work. But if you're not building the right thing, Agile tends to focus more on like the iterative process of development, and it kind of leaves off the design focus. So we're going to get to that later, trying to add the whole picture together. Native versus cross-platform. The case for this is I would much prefer using a well-designed Flutter, React Native, Ionic app than a badly designed natively written app. And SQL versus no SQL have an interesting picture about this. Tech choices are important, obviously, but again, if you're not building the right thing, then you're kind of wasting your time and money. This is actually an offline database that we made for a mobile app. It wasn't a successful app in the end. We spent a lot of time on tech. It was really elegant. These are all like, this is a full relational database. I think Sam might recognize this. But we didn't spend enough time focusing on the design of the app. We just had sprayed data everywhere, and users didn't really take on to it. So the question is, how do we make a good design then? So I'm not a designer, but I have talked to a lot of designers probably every day at work. I'm in a meeting with a designer. But I did have to Google this list, so I'm not an expert. So keep it simple. And the style these days, you'll notice on mobile apps, especially iOS, is like bold text, very few things on the screen. Give the user maybe one decision to make per screen. That'd be nice. Maybe a few things if it's a bit of a dashboard. I think you can break down most app design to lists, next buttons, maybe tabs and a search bar. Like, don't go too crazy with it. Emphasize what's important, highlight what the user most likely will want to do next. Keep it familiar. Yeah, go to the other apps like Facebook, the big ones, Netflix, Airbnb. Actually, the Coles app, my partner said she loves the Coles app. She says it's like her Reddit because she's a bit of a foodie. So yeah, look at other good examples of apps and basically try to copy what they do. And make it accessible and give things affordance. These are kind of related. Make sure you're accounting for font size, screen size changes. If it's accessible, more people will be able to use it, and even every user will probably find it more simple. And give things affordance. Affordance just means that don't hide things behind like a long press or a swipe. Make it obvious that what you can do with the app. So let's add an example. This is my first app I ever made. So now's your chance to tear it apart. So I did this like 8 years ago. So I didn't know much about UX design back then as a new developer. What things can you see that are probably wrong with it from a UX point of view? Put your hand up or shout out. It's messy. Yeah, yeah, you can say that. Not intuitive. Yeah, it's not familiar. When you look at it, you're like, I've never seen anything like this. What am I doing? Yeah, yeah.
Colors and contrast make it hard to read.
Yes, yeah, it's got like very bad contrast here, bad accessibility. Yes, different fonts, especially this one is super small, almost impossible to read. What else? Yeah. Yes, I was going to call that one out. There's not really a call to action. User doesn't know what to tap on. I mean, there's arrows pointing to things, but they seem kind of minor. And actually, probably the main call to action is the enable button up there, because if it's not enabled, the app's not working. But anyways, one more. Yeah, 2 navigation options. At least the left one's familiar and still in use, I suppose. I don't even remember what's under the 3 dots over there. I would say there was one thing I did right. Probably the text is orange because it's emphasized, and that's the main number you should be looking at, but that's about it. But it was a lot of fun to design, and I learned a lot. So let's maybe look at something that's a little better. So the UI here doesn't look that nice, but the UX is familiar, right? Because Windows made it familiar, I guess. There's a pretty clear call to action down there, the big next button. And have you ever been frustrated by an install kind of thing? You just click next, 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 it works. There's a hierarchy of emphasis, so the less important options are smaller, kind of in smaller text, and then the big next button tells you what to do next. All right, so now I'm going to switch on to design process basics. So where do you start, and what's a good process to make sure you don't make bad design? show up? Okay, double dime. Okay, so this is something we used at a startup a few years ago. We took Zendesk's idea. So the double diamond over there is a very typical design system. Has anyone heard of the double diamond? Yeah, like 5 or 6. So Zendesk just added on the last part here to make the triple diamond, and it kind of completes the picture because you've got the development side over here with the design side. So just to quickly give an overview of it, before we dive into it more, the expanding part means to brainstorm, to research, think of new ideas. And then the contracting parts are to make decisions, talk to people, collect all your information, and decide what you want to do. And then there's like kind of decision points in the middle. Yeah, that's probably about it. We'll dive into it in more detail. So to dive into this, we're going to use an example to run through the process. Let's imagine we are working in a small startup and the CTO, and you're making a notes app, like pretty familiar kind of app, keeping it pretty simple for the demo. And the CTO asks you to add a login screen. That's your task. And it's a small team, and you've got on your team a single part-time graphic designer. So that's highlighted as graphic designer because when I started a previous job, at that stage, I was quite into design and wanted to work closely with a good design team. And I asked in the interview if they had a design team, and they kind of offhandedly said, oh, yeah, we have a graphic designer. And I was like, that's not really, using that term from like 2005 web pages doesn't fill me with confidence. And it was pretty accurate, to be honest. So yeah, it would be nicer if they said, yeah, we have a 5-person UX design team that does a lot of user research. Okay, so but in this case, we're kind of designing with the developers and the graphic designer together. And we know we'll have to work pretty closely. So let's imagine we start off on this process that the CTO has asked us to add a login screen. So the first thing we might do is maybe call a meeting with the CTO, interview him, ask him, what exactly are you thinking? What do you want? We might also check reviews, gather information, go to the Play Store console if you're on Android, or the App Store, reviews, see if people are asking for a login screen. What's the major problem? What are we trying to solve here? Yeah, so we might find out that we don't really need a login screen. What the CTO really wanted was a way to back up the user's notes and data. And he just assumed a login screen would be needed for that. So now we've got our problem. That's great. We've agreed with the CTO. That's what we want to deal with. So we go into solution discovery. So this is actually the fun part, the part everyone likes. It's where you actually do design. So what you might do is look at competitors. How do they deal with this situation? You might look at Google Notes, for example. And there's a lot of things you can do at this stage. You might be generating wireframes, sketching ideas down with your designer. There's a process I like where you get a bunch of people in the room, designers, developers, probably CEOs, stakeholders, and it's a thing called Crazy Eights, where you try to generate 8 ideas in 8 minutes on a single page and just sketch like ideas of how you might solve this problem. And I think it's good to have people with different backgrounds, because developers might just jump straight to like some open source thing that they know about rather than trying to come up with bespoke ideas. So let's say this is the final design that we came up with. We're just going to add an icon button next to my notes to say that you're not synced, and then you click on that, and you can back up to Google Drive or Dropbox, and you can log in. So you notice that we actually didn't add a login screen, which is a nice feature for users because they can get started straight away, just add a note, and then they realize later that they might want it backed up. Okay, next stage is you want to test that your designs that you've generated are good or not. So how do you do that? You can discuss it with your team. You can try to hash out what you like best, what solves your CEO's problems. But you should also do user testing, definitely at this stage. So get real life users, like try to remember who your target audience is and get a cross-section of them. And then hold interviews, and then some typical questions you want to ask at those interviews would be things like describe what you see, just show them the front page of your app, and see if they can feedback what makes sense to them. And then what would you expect when you click that? When you're stepping through a flow, make sure that everything makes sense to them as they step through the flow. And the other thing you can do is just give them a task and sit back and watch them struggle through it. And you'll be surprised how hard things can be. Does everyone remember that meme about the blocks going in the wrong hole? So that happens a lot at this case. So I've done a few user interviews, and a couple of tips for it would be to record it, definitely if you can. It's very hard to kind of take notes and ask questions at the same time. Try not to solutionize and just get their pure feedback, and try to make them feel comfortable and like make it a realistic situation. And offline again. Oh, this was supposed to be a slide where, yeah, curious why that's not working. So at this stage, you haven't started development yet, so you won't have an app to prototype. So you'll need to use prototyping tools like Figma or Adobe XD, have those kind of tools. If you're not comfortable with that, most of those developers will probably jump straight to development and make something really rough at this stage to test. There's a bit of risk with that those rough designs make it to development because you forget to like review it, that kind of thing. There's another option which this video was going to show, I could find the YouTube clip later, is just using paper. So you can mock up things with paper, move buttons around with paper. I haven't tried that, but it sounds pretty cool and interesting. So after all this testing with the users, we decide, the Google Drive backup option is the way to go. And we start development. So this is the normal kind of sprint cycle these bubbles here are showing. The first thing, so as you start developing, you're probably exploring again, like you're looking for free things in open source that can do it for you, I guess, is what everyone tries to do first. And then, yeah, you're feeding back to the designer like problems you're running into. You might discover that Firebase is a better option because it does it real time, and the user doesn't have to constantly back up and remember to do that. And then it'll reach QA, and they'll be confused about something. You might have to tweak the design, but as you're going, you're hopefully getting smaller and smaller changes until you get to the point where the CEO sees something he doesn't like and wants to change the color. And you get this situation sometimes where the CEO wants to make some last-minute changes. You can see, I love the expression of this guy. It's definitely relatable. Okay, so throughout all that process, I think analytics are really helpful. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you see the word analytics? Maybe it's something like this, but we're not talking about that kind of analytics there. We're talking about UX-specific analytics, like the buttons they click, looking for problems in the flow that are causing users pain. So I don't think if most users knew you were using analytics just to remove their frustration, they would have a problem. Users only worry about when you're collecting their personal data and using that to serve them ads they don't want or something like that. Yeah, so the point here is choose one that gives you UX information. So there are some really cool tools out there. Has anyone used Full Story or session recording before? Yeah, a few people. Really powerful tools because they let you do almost like a user interview because you can just see the recording of how they were tapping and their mouse movement and that kind of thing. So it's kind of like hours and hours of user interviews, and you can see how people are really using your product. We used it at one previous company. We were doing kind of like an MS Paint style app, and we noticed that a lot of people were using the white pen as an eraser because it was just easier. And I don't think we had an eraser, so they were forced to use the white pen as an eraser. So you'll be surprised what users get up to when you see like session recordings. The only negative with those is they're expensive, and they do collect a lot of data, so that's difficult to get around, work with privacy issues. Mixpanel is my favorite. I did research at a previous job to look at all the analytics tools. Mixpanel is really easy to use, has great UX on their website, has a great free tier, and it's focused more on UX. Other tools like even Google Analytics is very much focused on like marketing and conversion rates and that kind of thing. So there's kind of two areas of analytics and tools associated to both. So yeah, use analytics at all stages of the UX process. When, for example, in that previous scenario, when the CTO wanted us to add login to the Notes app, we could look at the users, see where they're getting confused on the dashboard, that kind of thing, and use it when you have questions about maybe people are confused about the toolbar at the bottom when they click that. Do a lot of them drop off and that kind of thing? So this is a screenshot from Full Story, which is the session recording style one. So you can see along the bottom, you can just press play and watch the user's mouse move around and see what they're getting up to. It's really powerful because it uses the DOM, and you can just search for button clicks of the t-shirt button or something and find all the users that did that and watch 10 recordings of them clicking the picture or something like that. And this is a mix. Yep. That's just a Full Story. Yeah, so when they're just bashing the keyboard and the mouse button because they're angry. So yeah, Full Story have it as a feature to be able to track those. Yeah, this is Mixpanel looking at how the user flows through their app. So you can see they sign in. You get a real good picture of how your app works and how users are using your app. And let's imagine, for example, this upload business certificate here was the main goal of your whole app. And you can see where people get lost along the way towards that main goal, yeah. So last section of the talk is just kind of some fun look at some UX pitfalls that you've probably seen on some of your apps on your phone. Like this one, people might recognize. So autofill is really important to get right because it often reduces the number of taps and button clicks people need to enter from like 50 to 2 or something. So really big UX win. It's a little hard to get right and maintain. Remember to do it for all the fields that you have, like passwords, credit cards, addresses, everything like that. Does everyone remember from when COVID started and all the check-in apps you had to do and the menu ones, and then half of them didn't have autofill, and you're like, oh, I have to put my address in again. How painful was that? This is from a few days ago. The autofill for entering your password for Cellar Park is broken. It happens because Android or iOS system updates and they change how autofill works. And actually, there's a bit of an issue right at the moment with Jetpack Compose on Android, where it's not officially supported yet for text fields. So they're working on that. Hopefully, you don't see that in the wild too much on your apps before they fix it. Should be fixed in a month or so, I think. Yeah, accessibility. So probably 2 main points here. I'm not an accessibility expert, but from the work that I have to do is make sure your layout scales for text size up to the maximum that your phone supports. And also give your images and other items content descriptions so that TalkBack and other screen readers can work. I love things that kind of ironic like this, where it's a 99-1, pretty bad defeat from against the Denver Nuggets. Yeah, so on to the next one. Navigation is also difficult to get right. Watch out for carousels when you're swiping horizontally. I think it just happens accidentally that another team adds a higher level swipe outside of your inner level swipe, and then it's kind of undefined what happens. So it's actually switching the kind of page, like from homepage Reddit to popular sometimes, and then other times it's swiping the carousel image. And this is also from that Reddit subreddit of bad UX designs. This one's more Android specific. Let your users go back. I won't slander the name of which app this is, but you might recognize it. This was a bigger problem, I think, 10 years ago. A lot of Androids did this. I think they were trying to do like the roller coaster tycoon, block off the exits type of thing and make sure you're still in the app and using their app. But, yeah, it's not only an issue when you're trying to exit the app on Android, but there's a lot of situations where you shouldn't block the back button or block exiting the app. For example, when you show a dialogue, try not to be lazy and make it not dismissible. Let users navigate away from a loading screen if they click the wrong thing. Don't make them wait 20 seconds as they go through a tunnel. They'll definitely just exit your app. And also transitions. I think Material 3 has some great guidelines on this. There's a good blog post here about some user research they did about it. Who wants to guess which of these users preferred? Number 1, yep, that was right. They preferred the container transform transition, it's called. Later blogs or guidance from Material 3 are saying use that sparingly, don't put it everywhere in your app. And most of the research around this says to keep it fast and simple and don't try to make it too expressive. When you're developing, you'll probably get one of these two by default. So it is a little bit of extra effort to make sure you're giving users the affordance of what's happening when they click a button. So yeah, coming to the end of my talk, some miscellaneous tips for building good UX. Use open source when you can. They've been through a lot of the pain already of trying to fix usability problems, probably. So try not to be overconfident and say, I'll build it better myself. It'll probably take you 2 years and it'll be worse. So, and also, if it's not open source, don't be scared to buy things, a small subscription, even if it's $500 a month for some software or third-party software. It could save you money in the long run. Think about error states first. They tend to get missed. For example, what happens when the internet goes down? Do we want that a big full-screen dialogue? Because if it's not in the design, developer would probably just use what was there previously, and it rarely makes it into the final design unless you've got a nice full design team. Scrolling is okay. This is a bit of a story. At a previous job, the CTO didn't like scrolling on mobile apps. He was like, it's a dashboard, it shouldn't scroll. So we ended up starting to reduce text size, remove legal text, just so things could fit on one screen. Scrolling is super familiar for all mobile devs, so use it. Obviously, that's a bit of a joke, that one. And remember that development is the best job in the world because you get to do a lot of designing. So that's it. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you so much for that, Carson. Do we have any questions before we wrap up? Now, lunch is coming at, oh, we got one question there, yeah.
Yeah, that was definitely the inspiration for this talk, because I've seen it many times in different companies where there wasn't enough focus on design and a lot of money was wasted for building the wrong thing. Any other questions?
Well, thank you very much for that. Really, really interesting talk. Everybody give him another hand.